Hey, it's Soul back with Warcraft Weekly after taking the weekend off for some birthday celebrations and way too much Diablo. But we're back and there's a lot to cover, including some news that kicked up a lot of drama on social media, even though nothing has actually happened yet. So hit the like button, subscribe for the WoW coverage, catch me live when you can, and let's begin the march to patch 10.1.5 in the form of WoW's latest Come Back to the Game promo, the Winds of Sanctuary buff. Big bonuses to experience and reputation are live from now till July 11th. Think of the reps that you've been sitting on, the alts that are yearning to be more than just characters that you swap to for the Treasure Goblin event or Brewfest or Love is in the Air. They deserve to be at max level, so they can be doing the same things that they're doing already, but hey, at least they're max level. I've mentioned this numerous times and I'm gonna say it again, the WoW team has been laying down special events like this to keep folks busy as they get the next patch of content ready. With this event lasting until July 11th, you bet your ass that before that date, patch 10.1.5 will most likely be live. It's turning out to be a doozy of a patch and we're going to get to that in a bit. Closely related to our future adventures on the Dragon Isles, a new book has been announced, The War of the Scaleborn. It's a prequel in the flavor of many Warcraft novels like The War of the Ancients, and Arthas, and Stormrage, and Sylvanas, and many others. We can expect to learn a version of the truth about the conflict between the newly powered aspects and the rebellious incarnates, again, somebody's truth. And from this we can glean what's next for our adventures in World of Warcraft. The included art features our pal Alexstrasza having a spirited chat with Vironoth, who I joked looked like a young and spunky Winter Queen. With a book release date of October 31st so far and relying on some good old history, we can make some soft predictions. 10.1.5, which includes a mega dungeon and a new specialization for evokers, is predicted to launch no later than July 11th. Now, let's presume that 10.1.7 won't be quite as big as 10.1.5, and it's going to come out with a bit of a shorter wait. The WoW team has been clear that they want 0.7 patches to be kind of a lead-in to the next season, meaning that this book is timed to release as part of the unfolding story in 10.1.7 and a showdown of red versus blue because you miss it. We're going to learn a lot about the conflict between the aspects and the incarnates, the Titan's influence, and a lot more, and I am here for it. This week's 10.1.5 build takes us ever closer to launch, but not before starting a firestorm of drama that, as of this writing, we're not even sure exactly what's going on. We're talking about this series of pictures that depict traders' tender in these increments of 50 going all the way up to 1,000. Folks look at the pictures and the file paths and they went in an obvious direction. Oh my god, Blizz is going to put tender on the store. A move like this would be highly controversial, as the trading post was meant to be like rewards for the more casual player that they could earn over the month, and being able to buy tender to get all the rewards would ruin the whole point of the feature. At the same time though, others have been clamoring for a way to do exactly just that, buy all of the rewards out of a fear of missing out, and if it takes buying tender from the shop, so be it. I'd almost argue the reactions are getting out of hand, even prompting a WoW dev to tease that they wish they could talk more about what's going on but can't, prompting again speculation that the dev either wants to reassure players or to speak out against what's going on here but can't in fear of violating NDA. I want to hear your takes on this, and as usual, I'll kick things off. So, first, this is what data mining does to your brain. We don't have a good idea of what's happening here, but people are already like, oh, classic Blizz is back, screwing with players and ruining good things. Second, this is another lesson where the WoW team really should be getting in front of things with monthly blogs that tease about ideas that they have, plans for the future, and so on. And third, again, we don't know what's going on, and based on what I'm seeing, I can make up my own prediction of what's going on that is hardly the disaster that one thinks it is. So let's start with the pictures themselves. Why are there so many denominations? I can't imagine having the shop display a SKU for every value here. It makes too little sense, even the most cynical anti-Bobby-cutting view. It could be that very simply these new visual assets are what you see when you open the chest with tenders inside. Tender rewards come in denominations of 50, and according to the image, what we see starts at 250 and maxes out at 1,000. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't do conclusive testing on the PTR. I happen to get way more than 1,000 tender, so if that image was to be used, the system can't call an image for 3,500 tender, and because of how tender works, I'm not able to test it again. But let's push the goalpost back a little bit and say that, yeah, sure, we are going to be able to buy tender from the shop. I'm not so convinced that we'll be able to buy thousands and thousands of tender in one sitting and then just buy everything every month. And that's because store-bought tender has diminishing returns. Sounds weird, but hear me out. Every month we can earn 1,000 tender, and every month we see a bunch of new items in the shop. Mostly new. Some are discontinued items from the shop that we bought already, but eventually we're going to start seeing items cycled back in, some which we already bought. And even as the WoW team keeps adding in more stuff, eventually we may run into months where we can buy everything and have tender left over. That's a possibility even with the current model once we cycle through a year or so. If we can buy as much tender as we want, and there are only so many new items that have to show up each month, there's only going to be so much shop tender that we need to buy before we don't have to buy any more ever, because we'll keep outpacing it. Here's what I think's going on based on my copium-laced rationality. If not just a visual image of opening the chest, I can imagine a store purchase that lets you max your tender for the current month. So let's pretend it's near the end of the month and you're a few hundred tender short. You don't have time to farm it for whatever reason, so you just open up the shop and you try to buy tender. It's a single SKU that displays how much tender you're short by, and the shop tells you, okay, pay up and you'll automatically get this much tender once you make this purchase. Now in reality, you're only buying at most 500 tender because the other 500 you get for just showing up. One might see the higher increments on screen here if you don't even bother picking it up from the chest beforehand. As for why the value starts at 250, maybe there are other missing assets. Maybe the value is at 250 and any extra that exceeds the 1,000 monthly maximum is lost, and maybe I'm wrong. But if this is what buying tender is in the shop, I don't see that much of a problem here. In this case, the target market is the audience that just showed up late and is short on time. It's a very small audience, I'd argue, but still a very realistic scenario that still makes this fair for everyone. The one thing I want to keep believing is that there won't be a scenario where one person can have more tender than the next person, and the difference is because they bought tender from the shop. It just feels unnecessary to go in that direction. I totally understand the icky feeling that comes from having to make a choice with limited resources, but speaking just for me, it's something that I can readily accept because this isn't a fear of missing out, it's guaranteed you're missing out. But the fact that everyone is on the same boat makes that feel kind of okay. Buying tender to max out the month, but not beyond that, it sticks to the philosophy and Bobby at least gets gas for his yacht. It might be time for some of you to do some ring shopping, because according to a blue post, the primordial stones focused on damage are being nerfed by 40%. Kinda sucks, although this is a follow-up to earlier news that the ring would be left alone during patch 10.1 to give it some longevity, but after that, all bets are off. For now, they're not touching the healing stones, which already had an indirect nerf thanks to stamina increases introduced in this patch, but still you can bet at some point I'm gonna drag my raid into a run with 0 healers for, science. Meanwhile, one of the most requested asks are being answered. A skip is being added to the Siege of Orgrimmar, where at the start, you can click on an object that lets you skip all the way to Orgrimmar's inner sanctum, skipping a lot of the really fun parts of the raid, like waiting for Titan Keepers to talk, and waiting for goblins to open some doors. So now your weekly disappointments will come even faster. Meanwhile, hey, check out my Blood Elf cosplaying as an orc. While we're on the subject of transmog, very interesting quantum items have appeared on the PTR lately. Armor, weapons, and recently added, there's a mount that'll be available which could change the transmog collection game forever, but I doubt it. We don't have a good read on all the sources yet, but when obtaining these quantum items, they'll turn into transmog from the past. This also includes the quantum mount that was introduced just last week. So basically, there are transmog loot boxes, and we don't know what we're going to get. Social media has of course taken off speculating that we may get long lost appearances or ones that can only be found from the black market auction house. Like, is it possible that a Brutosaur could come from this? Maybe the better question is to ask, like, do you really take pleasure out of disappointing yourself and blaming Blizzard for it? Now, to be fair, I do think it would be very cool if these items specifically looked at our collections and made sure to always unlock something new that we didn't have before. I remember during Shadowlands, folks were hoping for transmog that would come from mobs that we defeat in Torghast, and if something memorable dropped, it would kind of softly communicate where some of our enemies ended up, which would be pretty fun, pretty cool, but I'm gonna withhold my excitement on on this one. Like, somehow I have doubts that the entire cosmetic loot table is going to be up for grabs because, well, it would 100% funnel players here for their weekly unlocks, and we just got the Siege of Orgrimmar skip. While the tender situation has had mostly one-sided reactions, an entirely different conversation is happening with certain daily quests in patch 10.1.5 that has us acting like kind of, I don't know, time enforcers. It's not so unlike the Caverns of Time quest where we helped Thrall escape Durnhold, which was like, hey, that's very cool, even though we had to let Taretha die, according to the canon. It's not so unlike helping Medivh bring the orcs to Azeroth, ensuring that the events for the past, 30 or so years took place and countless lives were lost, which is, again, not so cool. And we also allowed the Sundering to happen and for Arthas to slaughter the people of Stratholme, so one would figure that we'd be in good understanding by now of what it really means when the Bronze Dragonflight needs help and we need Valor points. We're once again asked to get our hands dirty for the sake of preserving the greatest timeline. Yeah, we've been recently told these example quests are going to be changed or even removed, but in one quest were to ensure a person's death back during the Legion invasion, as this sets off a series of events that eventually leads us to, well, winning. In another quest were to ensure that the demon soul securely remains in the Orcish Horde's possession during the Second War. Without going any further, like, okay, that doesn't sound so bad, but to put this into the fullest context, we're making sure that these orcs can continue using Alexstrasza, who is their prisoner, to quite literally breed their war machine. You want to guess which quest gets taken out? You'll also have to excuse my cowardice for not using certain terms to avoid YouTube suppressing this video more than it usually does, but reactions to these quests were very much an uneven split. There's a very loud and angry side of the audience who does not want to feel complicit in terrible events that may draw parallels to their real-life trauma. It doesn't matter if it's a video game or that it's a fictional character, even if it's already happened, and even if it's an optional daily quest. And the fact that it was data mined, meaning that multiple people made these and let these quests make it this far in production, is absolutely unforgivable. How dare they, the writing team? How dare they write Chromie to make light of something that's so serious, and for Alexstrasza to have such a subdued response? That kind of summarizes one viewpoint. On the other side of this divide, there are folks who are like, dude, this is just a game. It's Warcraft, man. It's not some preschool game. It's a game where tons of people have died, where we as champions have killed countless creatures with blades and hammers and fire and stuff. Don't come at us with this, oh, we don't want to be complicit nonsense when the champion of Azeroth is also its most renowned mass murderer, and it's an optional quest. Just don't do it if it makes you uncomfortable. And that's the other side. And naturally, I, the professional fence walker, have my own take to share, and you're not going to fully agree, and well, just hear me out. If they are in fact removing the Alexstrasza quest, I'm glad they're doing it. I wanted it to be gone. If you're not going to listen to anything else, at least leave with that takeaway. I just don't think that this quest should stay in. I do get that when it comes to this time travel stuff, it's kind of boring to save the hero to save the future, but it's kind of neat to explore the idea of saving the bad guy to save the future. This here, it goes beyond being edgy though. The controversy around it has just gotten out of hand. The genie's out the bottle, and to keep it in would forward the narrative that the WoW team welcomes putting players into these sorts of awkward situations, no matter how they try to clean it up. When I saw the reactions on social media, my attention didn't focus that much on what was said about Alexstrasza because, to be honest, that's an emotional landmine, and there's no way that quest would go live in my head. I just kind of settled that in my head. That was that. So I instead looked at the negative reactions to Chromie, who offers up these dailies because honestly, she is what this topic should be about. Alexstrasza's quest, it just kind of sucked all the oxygen out the room. The beef was that for Chromie, of all people, to enable what Alexstrasza went through was in extremely poor taste, and that goes for some of the other quests. But is it really in poor taste? Because in her appearances over the years, Chromie comes off with this very whimsy and childish tone that, to me, it's not exactly sociopathic, but it's the front that she puts up for the darker work that she does. We sometimes observe that she's not sure of what version of surroundings that she's in, or the version of you that she's dealing with, and she comes off with the energy that she's pulled in so many different directions that any outside observers like us, we can't hope to understand the maelstrom that's going on in her head. So in these dailies, she's asking us to kill someone and to indirectly help Alexstrasza stay in a very dark situation. Now to us, she's asking us to enable these horrific acts for reasons that we can't understand. But to Chromie, it's like Thursday, with only the faintest acknowledgement that, oh, right, this is supposed to be emotionally heavy stuff, but hey, what's new? I do this all the time. Some are saying that the writing team is handling a very sensitive situation extremely poorly. Now, I'm not going to argue that. The way I also see it, though, it's Chromie who handles situations like this extremely poorly because she's been doing this for, I don't know, thousands of years. She's a hard-boiled veteran and must have seen some really crazy things in her very long career as a defender of time or whatever she calls herself. All of these things can be true. Now, maybe we would like her to be more sensitive because, hey, she's Chromie, she's fun, she's beloved. But she's also one of those time-traveling veterans who knows the weight of having to let horrible things happen to achieve the greatest outcome, the sacred timeline. We've seen tropes like this in countless books and movies and games. I feel like the writing here, unfortunately, is on point for this darker and jaded side of Chromie, and some just don't like what they're seeing. Patch 10.1 had us players run through the motions of what happened with the blue and the black dragonflights, with lots of lead up, lengthy quest lines, and what happened to Alexstrasza might never be handled in game. I hope it doesn't, but it especially shouldn't be handled in a daily quest. Meanwhile, being close to the Bronze Dragonflight is to walk the line between a light and a dark morality. There's an endless amount of interesting discussion to be had on this subject, and it starts with what if. It's like the basis of most of our discourse. As for what should be playable, as for what should our characters play a part in, even if we're just making sure already occurring events happen, that's for you folks in the comments to discuss, and that's the show. As a commentator, part of the work is to observe as best I can the reactions from fans and supporters and critics. The big topics of this week with the Tender and the Bronze dailies, it brought out really strong emotional responses, and for good reason. And a keyword that stood out for me was the word betrayal, making some of these folks' attachment and relationship with the game very personal. So my question to you folks is, how attached are you to pieces of entertainment like this? And it doesn't have to be like World of Warcraft. It could be a game or a TV or a book series, a fictional character. You're going to learn something about me today. Warning. Part of what makes me is that I suffer headaches caused primarily by stress, usually emotional stress, and so over the years I've had to condition myself to maintain an emotional distance wherever possible. So I'm never all that excited. I never really get mad or frustrated, and when it comes to the World of Warcraft, the worst things can happen and I'll just kind of shrug it off. I mean, look at the Protection Paladin 4-piece bonus. I am unfazed, but of course there are drawbacks. It's hard for me to deal with strangers, even in video games, which is why I struggle with dealing with pugs, because possible stress. And anything dog related just brings the walls crashing down. I'm asking only because I wanted to share, and now I want to listen. So let's give a big thanks to our Twitch family. Thank you so much for joining in for all the Diablo 4 exploration. A loving hello to our patrons, including Newcomer. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for joining up. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you, viewer, for making it to the end. I'm still working on a Diablo 4 review where I answer a simple question: buy it, wait, or skip? All based on my initial playthrough, and it's going to be great if you were to give it a click. You'll know when it's out though by subscribing to the channel, but also like the video and catch me live. I'm continuing my journey through Diablo 4 while promos are still going on, and it's not going to be long until we're probably going to be in a WoW patch right after that's done, so there's no end to the fun. I wish you a great and a safe weekend. Thank you for the birthday wishes, and I'll see you next time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.